Hey friends, welcome to this week's episode podcast on the Inside Approach, the ABCs of Becoming More. I'm super excited to have our guest on today. This man I've known for 3 years, and he has become a dear friend of mine, a mentor of mine, and I want to welcome Nathan DeTracy to the podcast today. Thank you so much for being on here.
Yeah, I'm super excited just to get into this conversation.
Great. Super good. Today we're going to be covering letter H on humility, and when I thought of that topic, Nathan's name popped in my head over and over and over again as I have seen this man and worked with this man for the years that we have. He is a gentle servant, a man of God, and just a humble servant to everybody. So I've really appreciated my opportunity to be in his midst and to be able to learn from him. He's a wonderful husband, a wonderful father, a great businessman, and a great dear friend of mine. So we're going to go right into this and talk about humility today. As you can see from our shirts, we got our humility shirts on, right? Yes. Representing the humility here. But I have a few list of questions here that we'll go over, and I'll let you just kind of share with the followers what what are on your mind. And again, there's no direction on any of this. We just want to speak from the heart. So that's what I love about you too, is you speak from the heart. So let's start off with the first one. How would you define humility?
Yeah, I mean, number one, I want to say I'm honored that you would think of me when you say that. For me, I think of hungry, because I think sometimes as we start to learn more and there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? Like knowledge is maybe the understanding of what something is, but wisdom is actually acting it out, right? And all the things that come along with that. And I think humility, what it does is along the journey, it allows us to continue to understand that the more we learn, the more we actually need to learn, right? And so that to me is, if you can stay that way, what it does is it opens up doors and it makes every single person in front of you more important. Because I think the opposite of that is when you feel like you have so much value to give that nobody has value to give you. And I just think, as a human race, we always have something to gain from somebody else. They always have gifts, and sometimes those gifts look very different, but there's always something there to share and to cultivate from somebody else.
I love that. I mean, we all have different experiences, different teachings, different things that we've, like you said, learning knowledge, and then we've applied that knowledge, and it's caused us to grow. And we can't walk in their shoes, so it's a matter of putting us in a position of teachable, to be able to learn and understand what people have gone through, to be able to understand certain things a little more. So I really like that. I like that a lot. So that's really good. Let's go on to the next one. It says, in what ways does humility help us in our journey in becoming more? You kind of alluded to that, but just kind of like, what would you say in helping us to become more?
Well, I think we first have to understand that there's seasons to our life. There's different chapters, right? And so sometimes I've read a book and thought that I've kind of mastered that book, but then I hit a different season and all of a sudden that book means something totally different. And so again, I think that's the process of humanity and just learning and growing and constantly being in that growth mode is when you look through the lens of being humble and understanding that there's always more to learn. I think it opens up the doors, and I think what it allows you to do is be a sponge of everything that's going on and just see things from different perspectives. And your perspective is always changing, you're always evolving, and so that, just to keep that in mind, I think is a very powerful tool.
Good. So I mean, becoming more is evolving, an evolution to our existence, to our mindset, to our purpose, to just who we are and our contribution to this world. So being a sponge, I love that, because again, like you said, reading a book, it's like we read it, certain things pick out, we read it again, like, wait a minute, was that in there the first time we read it? Yeah. But it's the same thing, like every time just interacting with people. I mean, I spent the weekend with him and his wife, and I've evolved because of their influence in my life with you and your wife, and just, it's helped me have better perspective on life, on relationships, on business, on everything we've just talked about. And so it's been nice to kind of be a sponge around you guys this weekend. Again, because of your influence has been so powerful in my life that, just seeing you in this state of just being in your home. And by the way, we are in his home. Thank you for having me in your home and in your studio to be able to record this. But it's been an honor to kind of be a sponge and to be able to learn from you and your wife. So I like that, and to be able to help our perspective. Anything else more on that?
No, let's go to the next one. We'll unpack some more stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. Next question is, what role does humility play in our relationships, such as family, socially, in business? That's a loaded question too.
It is a loaded question. I think family is the hardest to probably show humility, because I think, you even take like biblical things like Jesus, for instance, and you don't have to be a believer, but he wasn't looked at as the leader he was, the Messiah, in his hometown, because they saw him growing up through that whole process, right? So they always thought of him as this little kid. Well, we see that happening all the time in everyday life, and especially with our family. And so I think that, like, when you really start to understand that there's a process and you see that other people are growing through their lives and their experiences, that there's always something to take, that shows a huge amount of not just humility, but also just being wise and also being mature. It's a maturity to understand that your child. I mean, you got to experience it. One of my kids growing up and did his first bodybuilding show. To watch him learn through that process, but then also to be like, man, I could take some of the things that he did, some of the courage that he brought to the stage and his presence and those types of things. It becomes a learning experience for me, not only to see what he does and borrow from that, but also to see him in a different lens, right? And now maybe we're a little bit more on equals because now he has a little bit of that experience, right? If I wasn't humble, I wasn't utilizing humility, I think that you would always think that you are like on that pedestal, right? And so to bring others to that place with you so that you're walking alongside of them instead of being above them, I think it's a big piece of building culture and allowing other people to rise up.
No, I love that, especially on the family level. I mean, it's really easy. I mean, maybe as men, maybe as mothers, women, to try to pull kind of a hierarchy. I lost the word I was thinking of, but just that position of power. And it can go to our head. As soon as man gets a little bit of power, it can go to their head. But to be able to then humble yourself enough to, like you just said, you learn from your son. I got 2 sons myself. It's like there are times they're calling me out on my stuff, and I have to humble myself and accept that. And so it is a give and take type thing when it comes to humility in a family unit, for sure.
Yeah. And I think in the family dynamic, I think it really shows, it opens up love.
Good.
Because I think that by nature, not speaking for every situation, but you look at the news. The news is 70 to, I think it's more than that. I think it's like 92% of all negativity, right? And what it's trying to always do is create separation. It's me against them. And so how do we change the culture? We change it in our own homes, our 4 walls, right? And so to be able to live in love and to have that humility and to show that, it allows other people to grow and then to duplicate that outside of your 4 walls, right? And so I think that's one of the most important breeding grounds is within the 4 walls.
No, 100%. No failure can compensate for, or no success can compensate for failure in the home, for sure. No, that's a big one. I like that. What about, obviously that you address the social aspect of it, because we can teach that in our homes, we can emulate that and have that go forward. Obviously, it's going to help out in our social and our neighborhood type thing. But what about us as individuals? How can we go forth and be a little more practicing this humility in a social environment?
I think we all have influence whether we want to admit it or not, right? It could be in your little social circle, it could be with a team, it could be at work, it could be wherever your environment is. You do have the capability, but also without even knowing it, people are watching you. And so I think anytime you start to practice these things and you're being intentional, I think that the hardest part is reflection. If you could set up a period of a little spot in your day, whether that's when you're in the shower or when you're making your bed or whatever it is, but you do that very consistently where you're reflecting back on, how did yesterday go? How do I start to hold myself accountable? Because we can't always be perfect, but we always have the ability to go back and make something that was done wrong right? And that alone is practicing humility, right? Just to admit that and then to act on that. And so I think for me, that was one of the key things. I talked about it for a long period of time. I was going to make the bed and I was going to reflect back on the day. And so that got my day started right. And then then my wife started making the bed with me, and so I was robbed of that alone time. Not robbed, but it became something different.
Sure.
And so then I thought, okay, well, let me do this in the shower. And so then that became that time where I'm being very intentional with the time that otherwise would be maybe wasted, right? And how do I make that influence who I want to become, and also reflect on what do I need to change?
I love it. The two words that really stood out to me was the reflection time and making it intentional. I think we can get stuck in very habitual mindsets. I mean, I'm guilty as charged. I'm very repetitive in my day-to-day. It's really easy to do that, and just like if something gets in the way of that, my pride gets in the way, my ego gets in the way, and it just kind of ruffles my feathers. But if we start going with the intentional, having that reflection time to reflect, the day or the moment, on what happened and what transpired, to make those little adjustments, those little dial changes, to make us more intentional, was huge. I think I really like that part, so I wrote that down.
There's something that I've just recently learned, and it's about the subconscious, like so what your body is on autopilot, what it normally does, right? Like, so there's a part of your brain, the majority of your brain, like it acts out, it actually wants to create patterns. And so when we're doing patterns that don't serve us, we have to be very intentional to break those patterns, right? And so that's one of those things that I'm starting to learn is, if your subconscious is 95% is what they say is kind of the number of things that you do over and over. Like if you took your whole week and laid it out, there would be 95% of it that's just repetitive.
Wow. Yeah.
And so you have to be very intentional with that 5%, that conscious piece. And what they're saying in a lot of the studies and those that really specifically dive into that stuff is you have to connect a thought with an emotion. So which means you have to really think through things. There's going to be a lot of fleeing thoughts that come in and then they go out. You never think of it again. But if you're intentional with that 5% and you create some alone time where whether it's your journaling or again, you're in the shower and you're just really thinking through, well, why did I do that? Why did I feel like that? What was the response? Now you're starting to rewire your subconscious, and then that's what starts to create that loop, because that will feed your conscious. And so that is something that, just recently I've been really understanding, I guess. Some of it I was unconsciously like putting into action, but just from following other people. But now that I start to understand that, I'm like, okay, we actually have a lot of control in a brain that tries to take control.
Wow, I mean, powerful, friends, powerful. I mean, that's a subject all on its own right there. But understanding, again, knowledge, wisdom, right? It's like we've all heard of the subconscious and how powerful the subconscious is, but now the wisdom that you just spoke of makes it more intentional. And so we're intentionally applying, certain practices in order to humble ourselves, but in order to make ourselves become more at the same time. That was awesome. I mean, we could stop right there, but I got more questions, so that was awesome. Appreciate that, Nate. That was awesome. Okay, what about in business? Let's talk about, what role does the humility play in business? I mean, you're a very successful businessman. You've been an entrepreneur for many, many years. Maybe give a little bit of background on your entrepreneurship first, and then kind of maybe go into how humility has played into your success as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, I'd say I have kind of 3 seasons so far. I owned a gym. I was a personal trainer, a professional bodybuilder, and owned a gym for from 2006 to 2000. I think they closed it down in 2012. I struggled a little bit in the end because I really didn't know a lot about marketing. I was a great trainer, nutritionist, psychologist, all the things that come along with that. But I didn't know how to duplicate myself and how to create the marketing around that, right, to drive people in. And so I think that, again, how it helps you in business. Well, let me go back. That was my first season. Then we got into a direct sales business that I joined with my wife, and realized that successful businesses are built on culture. It's built on building relationships, because your money is going to ebb and flow, right? The income it's never straight up. And so when you build culture, that creates that glue, that sticking point, and then you can drive people through the tough times. Otherwise, tough times come and people divide. They start to actually, cut each other down.
Sure.
But if you have a great culture, then when the tough times come, you actually come closer together and you fight through that and you actually become stronger. And so that led into that business. We grew a very successful 7-figure business for many years. I think we were in that for 14 years. Half of that we had a 7-figure business. The business itself, the company went under. And so we were forced to take that culture somewhere else and duplicated it and then doubled it within a couple of years. And so, what that started really showing me is culture is king. That, again, you can have the best opportunities, you can have the best products in the world, everybody's selling something. So once you get past that nobody wants to be a salesperson, but when you believe in something and you ask enough questions and you understand what there's a need, you connect people to a need. And when you get really good, if you can't fulfill that need, then you connect them to somebody else. And that builds trust, right? And so that was kind of our journey from, I guess, 2006 to recently. Throughout that process, I think at the beginning of anything, as you're growing, you think you know everything. And again, it's just that maturity, right? And so you tend to be more of a drill sergeant. I think as you start to mature, you start to ask questions and start to pull things out of people and you edify them. And as a leader, it's less about you. If things go wrong, you take charge and say that was on me. But if things go right, you're celebrating other people. And I think, again, that plays in humility. Like, how do I make somebody else feel more special than me? Because I understand that duplication and multiplication, when multiple people are doing the same thing, that creates that momentum, right? And that's what creates massive success, because you just can't do things on your own and get you can go fast, but you can't get very far without doing it with a culture.
Momentum, synergy, culture. I think that's one of the things that I've admired about you and your wife the most, is that the short time that I've get to know you is that you don't make it about you. I mean, you make it about culture, you make it about family, you make it about the individual. There's been many, many times that I go up to Nathan and want to ask him questions, and he just totally flips it. How are you? What are you up to? How's your life going? It's really investing in me and loving me, and has really brought a brotherhood between us, just because, again, he wants to build the people, he wants to build the individual, and that's just a pure sign of humility. And again, that's why I picked this man for this topic today. And just being here in this short amount of time, just this weekend, and spending this time, it's been the same way. It's just invested in me. He's taken me to the gym 3 times this week and kicked my butt. So we're all over, but it's been cool because it's something we both enjoy together. But he took the time to say, "Hey, do you want to go to the gym?" And he mapped out the course, the workout, and it was just a great time. But again, you invest in people because you care. And you want to build them up because, again, that synergy, that momentum has always been very good. And that's really huge in business. I don't know how many jobs or businesses you've been in the past where people that are at the bosses, they want to kind of take the reins and be the spotlight and say it's because of me that you guys all have jobs, and they want to build themselves up, versus like, this is a team effort. I'm grateful for all the people contributing to the success of the company. And that's really cool. So I appreciate that culture you guys built.
Yeah, appreciate being a part of it.
All right, next question is, how does humility affect, I've jumped ahead. Can you share a personal experience? Because obviously I want people to, I want us all to be able to relate to this, but can you share a personal experience where humility led to a positive outcome?
Well, I would say that in every season of life I've had, I've always gravitated towards leaders that, because of that, they wanted to make you better. And so let me take more of a generalization. Like in bodybuilding, in that atmosphere, it was all about yourself. And so my parents died when I was 23 years old. I dove into bodybuilding because I started getting into drugs and partying and that kind of stuff, just numbing it and not having a lot of leadership around me. On the outside, I created a very good persona from 2001 to 2009, where I looked the part on the outside, but I was very broken on the inside. And it wasn't until I got into my future wife, she had brought me to a company and said, "Hey, let's dive into this because of the potential of it." But what I saw leaders that were willing to pour into people, a lot of them that had no benefit financially. And I saw how they led, and I saw how they built culture, and that's kind of where we started copying. How do we build culture? How do we build people up? How do we make it about them? How do we understand where they're at, not judge them, and actually be okay with being like, you know what, I felt that way too. Now let's lock arms and let's do this together, and what do you want to get, and how do we get there? And so I saw that modeled through many different leaders in that period of time. I would say 2000, probably the beginning I started seeing it 2008 to 2011, to the point where I gave up my bodybuilding career and put that aside because I felt like this was so much more impactful, and it was like a family. It was like a healthy family that was building you up. And so I think that was life-changing to me, because I think bodybuilding was really great because it taught me, if you do this, you're going to get this, right? If you put the time into the gym's not going to lie to you. You're just going to, if you're consistent enough, you will outwork people. Because I didn't have the best genetics, but I ended up being one of the best in the world by 2009, because I just was very, very consistent, and I had a regimen. But there was a big piece of me that was broken inside. And so to see those types of leaders and how they led with humility, and how they led with love, and how they were me focused at the time, what I needed somebody to be focused on me, it really helped me to take that next step and say, okay, this is what I want to build regardless of what I'm doing. And so that was a big moment for me.
No, that's huge. I mean, obviously we have the examples that go before us, and we got to be very selective on those individuals, because they can either take us down a really good course, or they could take us down a really bad course. And so it's nice that you're able to identify and find and associate with good, positive role models in order to rub shoulders with, in order to help you go after those goals and in that journey of becoming the individual of the day.
And an analogy that really helped me was, which again in bodybuilding it was, and even personal training and gyms and that type of thing, it's how do I, you'll see this a lot on social media, like how do I knock somebody down? How do I make their building smaller, right? If we're talking about buildings in New York, like instead of building the biggest building, it's how do I cut that one down so that mine appears bigger, right? And in an environment where it's about personal growth and it's about relationship, it's how do I consistently work on myself so that I separate myself from others? Then I become attractive. Then people want to be a part of that. You don't need to talk about the negativity of somebody else or what they're doing wrong. You just do everything right, and it becomes so different.
Love it.
Right? And that was just something that was, again, it was just a total transformation that made me realize, man, I think I'm doing things a little bit wrong. I've got to shift this. I got to make it more about relationship and love and trust and all those things that come along with that are attractive and that actually draw people to you.
Oh, again, great nuggets here, friends. Great nuggets here. I mean, to be able to build yourself up in order to not be prideful, but to be able to just the betterment of one can help the benefit of many. And that is a form of humility. It's just doing the best you can be to become the ultimate you, in order to serve more people, to be able to influence more people. Not tear them down, but help. We got these plants right here. I mean, look at this bamboo, right? These things sprout, like we don't even go that analogy, but just enough water and enough nourishment, enough soil that you can just keep pouring into people to help just build them up.
And I think it's also, there's a place for comparison. There's a negative and there's a positive. And actually, I think there's a negative and positive to anything. It's perception, right?
Sure.
But if you utilize the comparison to be like, okay, well, this is what I see. Are they getting the fruit that I want? Or, because there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of followers, if we're talking this
Sure.
day and age, right? But they're not necessarily truly helping people. They're just there to make themselves feel important. But are they driving their lives and they're seeing the fruit? And then you learn who is doing that. And when you do that, then you start to follow the right people.
Right.
Versus, like you said, you find the wrong path, and then all of a sudden you're somebody you don't want to be.
Yeah. No. Awesome. Mic drop. No, good stuff. All right. The next question here is, how does humility affect your ability to accept and understand this diverse perspectives that we're just kind of going into a little bit?
Say that one more
You
time.
bet.
Let that sink in for a minute.
How does humility affect your ability to accept and understand diverse perspectives?
I think that we live in a world where there's a lot of diversification, if you want to call that.
True.
I think what we really have is we have a lot of hurt people that aren't listened to, and so they have to make a point, right? More than ever before. So we're more aware of it, but I think there's more separation than there's ever been. Some of that because of social media, because people don't know how to actually communicate in front of each other and actually share. It's very easy to put somebody down when you actually don't know the person, right? It's one of those things. If I think about this all the time, if I only knew your story, it'd be hard not to root for you. Like that's always what's in my head. Like if I could learn this person's story, it would actually be hard not to root for that person because you now understand why they're the way they are, even if they're a total jerk to you, right? Like you're like, well, maybe they grew up with a dad like that, or maybe they didn't have a dad, or maybe they've just never, had found their ability to feel like they're important in the world. So when you start to understand that everybody's dealing with something, you don't take it personal, and it changes your perspective. But that takes a lot of work,
Sure.
right? Because it's very easy to become to feel attacked, especially in this day and age. So I think it's you want to say it's listening a little bit more, but I think it's asking more questions to try to understand why somebody feels that way. And it doesn't mean that you have to agree. Like another saying that a good pastor friend that I had, he said, disagreements don't lead to divorce, right? And like he's not just talking about in a relationship. He's talking about in friendships. There's so many times that people it has to be us against you. Like that's how they have to operate.
Right.
But what if it wasn't like that? What if I understood and you know what, I don't agree, but now I have a deeper understanding of why you feel that way. And we can agree to disagree maybe on that one, but we can still be friends. Right? If we could live life like that, I think the world would be a better place. And I think there'd be a lot more understanding, there'd be a lot less separation, there'd be a lot less people having to talk about it. And I think that would solve a lot of issues.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, I'm writing these notes down here, it's like learning the story. Because we're all entitled to our perspective, right? Hands down, based on our experiences, based on our situations, our upbringing or whatever it might be, we're all entitled. That's totally fine. But it's when we start to conflict, we're trying to push our agenda, pushing our perspective onto somebody else is where this conflict happens. And so I like what you said. You don't have to necessarily agree with them, but lend a listening ear. Get really good at asking questions in order to get better perspective. It is a true sign of humility, because then it just gives you understanding. No, I love that. I don't even think I can add to that. And then the other one is just, lots of people are hurting. And so we need to, we all have hurt, we all have damage, based on whatever situations we've gone through. And so that hurt can be manifested in so many different ways. And if we come to the table with that hurt being our dominant, driving force, then that's not going to get us anywhere. So yes, we hurt, but we need to learn to process that hurt and humble ourselves in order to get to a place where we can listen to perspective of others. And like I said, the world would be a better place. I think we'd all agree with that. Just there's so much conflict, so much war, all across this world, that it could be resolved with just a little more humility, just a little more listening, a little more compassion. Yeah, so I like that. I like that a lot. Last question here is, what are some practices or habits that you follow to cultivate humility in your daily life? And you kind of alluded to some of those, but maybe you can expand on some of those. But does that question make sense?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
I think, again, I talked about, the practice in the shower, making the bed, or the reflection. I think is very important. I think also understanding how you're operating, because I look at two worldviews. There's a separation and a connection worldview. Okay, I think that the majority of our society has taught us a separation view. What it operates out of is scarcity. There's not enough, whether that's there's not enough money, there's not enough love, there's not enough understanding, there's not enough, I'm not enough, right? A lot of times that's the deeper root, okay? But what happens there is it creates a fear of something, fear of failure, fear of loss, and you operate out of a false identity, which means that you're doing things that aren't actually to your character. So what I always think about, and a lot of this is in reflection, is that my true character? Because the truth is there's abundance, there's a plenty, there's always enough. There's always the opportunity. It doesn't matter your race, your ethnicity, like at every level somebody has succeeded. Somebody has come from nothing to something, right? There's always opportunities there. It's our perception and how we're seeing things. And you build up momentum based off of the lens in which you see out of it, right? The person, again, talking about your subconscious, the person that's constantly telling themselves, this isn't a loss, it's a lesson, is going to look at that different. They're going to learn from it. The person that says it's a loss, they're actually going to become lesser than, because now they look at themselves as a loser. And so I'm always asking myself that question in a reflection, not just how did that go with that individual, how could I handle that different, but am I operating in my true identity versus my false identity? Am I operating out of abundance or scarcity? And it starts to kind of hone you in, and you get on a pattern. Again, you can't always do the right thing, but you can always make whatever you've done right. You can always go back and make it right. And so I think that's one of the practices that, as of lately, that I'm really trying to hone in on consistently, and just ask myself, like, how do I become that ideal self?
Fantastic. I mean, again, it's like the ABCs of becoming more. Your ideal self is just becoming more, and it's step by step. It's day by day. It's reflection. It's intention. Just making that time to just to back up and rewind and just review, and kind of see what you did and how things could have maybe gone a little bit better, or what you could do moving forward, in order to make those changes little by little. The separation versus the connection. I couldn't agree with you more. It just seems like we're being forced to compete against each other and be contentious, versus just bringing it together. And I think what we've been talking about today, as far as being, a little more humble and being a little more listening, and asking more questions and being more intentional with our days and our purposes and our mindsets, will give us that connection, in order to do that. And so, practices, it comes down to just making honest efforts in each of our daily lives to just become a little bit better. I like to look at it as like just turning the dial on either the thermostat, turning the little dial on the stove, whatever it is, just to get us a little bit more a little bit hotter, but in the good, in order to rise our level of intention, our level of purpose, in order to do good and to be good and to be the best we can be every single day. Fear or not feeling enough. Wow, that could be a whole topic on that alone. I know that
for the next one.
Oh my gosh, for real. Guilty as charged as well. Self-sabotage. It's a real thing, but I think, friends, Nathan and I are here to tell you today, you are enough. You are a special individual. You were placed on this earth for a reason at this time, and you have a purpose. And we invite you to find that. We're here to help support that. And as we go through our journey, I'm constantly trying to find my purpose as well. And that's what I love about what we do as individuals, as we mastermind, as we contribute, as we do this podcast, as we devote ourselves into a journey of becoming more. We invite everybody to do that as well. So any closing thoughts you'd like to share with everybody?
Just the old saying, we're better together. I think we're constantly learning from each other, and we're constantly assessing, and when you cannot judge, but you assess. Even if somebody that's close to you does something you don't like, you're like, okay, well, how did that make me feel, or how did that make that other person feel? Okay, now I get to learn from that experience. It doesn't always have to be your own experience. And that's the great thing about listening to this kind of stuff and just allowing it to kind of marinate and work through those things it's powerful tools for life.
Well, obviously people are going to impress with you just as I am. Where would be a good place for them to follow you? Get some more of this Nathan DeTracy stuff.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Nathan DeTracy, or Facebook, and we're coming out with a new mindset mastery class very soon. So So we'll be putting that out there very soon.
Yeah, so follow Nathan DeTracy for more information, more inspiration. Thank you again, sir. Appreciate you being on the Zoom
Thank you.
or podcast, whatever we're on right now.